Kia ora and welcome everybody. My name is Eri Rakanui and this is Big Life Mindset, a podcast where you can learn how to be uncomfortable, grow, and to love life more. I've coached winners of the Westpac Bank Innovation Awards. I've created online courses to build your confidence at work. I've helped people with career and relationship changes, and I regularly put myself into uncomfortable situations so that everybody can benefit from the results. Today, we're going to get the inside oil on how it's not too dissimilar managing adults and children. And more importantly, we're going to hear from a guest who is going to tell us why he's managed to overcome situations where so many others have given up. Now, this is going to be really useful if you've either battled against the system and you've just banged your head against the wall wondering why it doesn't work in the way that you need it to, or you're a parent and you've lost your shit at your kids at some stage. All right, let's get into it, eh? It is my absolute pleasure to have on our next guest, Roman Prokopchuk, and I do hope I've pronounced his name correctly. Roman has a very interesting background, and I'm so glad that he's made some time to be on the show because he is a busy man. So he's a first-generation immigrant from Ukraine. He arrived in the US with 6 other family members into a 2-bedroom apartment. He's also interned with the Secret Service and held a top-secret government clearance, which is not something you hear of every day. At one stage, he was forced to become a self-taught digital marketer, and as a result of the '08 recession, he fell in love with it. He's got all sorts of experience across digital teams, senior leadership roles, 600 campaigns, many industries. I mean, he's been there and done that in that regard. But the thing that I really wanted to talk with Roman about was that he is also a foster parent and has had 29 kids in his home since June 2018. Also, he became a foster parent by going through 6 miscarriages with his wife in 3 years, 2 of which happened on Christmas Day. With death, loss, and hardships, Roman pushes through no matter what. Roman, thank you for joining me today, brother. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it as well.
Awesome, man. Awesome. So just kind of quickly casting our eye back across some of your history. So you've obviously come from the Ukraine. You and your family moved over?
Yeah, we came in 1990. Ukraine was still under the Soviet Union. We had a sponsor here. We went through Vienna, Austria, Rome, Italy, and then here to the US. That was kind of like when the immigration became a little lenient, like the Berlin Wall fell, and that was kind of like the exodus path to the U.S. Technically, we came as religious refugees. We went to church in Ukraine, even though under communism, you can't necessarily practice your religion. Like the state is who you serve per se. So my family got a lot of, privileges and things they've earned taken away, persecuted, stuff like that. So in 1990, when I was 5 in March, we came here with my mom, my dad, my grandparents, my aunt, and my brother, as you mentioned, to a 2-bedroom apartment.
And so where is here?
New Jersey. It's funny because I was supposed to end up in California, San Mateo, California, but I ended up on the East Coast. Yeah. So a lot of the time I think about like the dynamics of growing up like West Coast versus East Coast, but I mean, it seemed to work out.
Sounds like you landed in the right place anyway, mate. Talk to me a little bit about the Secret Service stuff. I mean, what you can share, of course.
Yeah, so I was a criminal justice major. I wanted to kind of go that path, mainly like a federal law enforcement, things like different forensics, crime scene investigation interested me. Mm-hmm. And I also was about to go in the Marine Corps also as an officer from college, but a health issue kind of prevented that. But basically, I had a 6-month background check. You do things like your family and close friends get interviewed to make sure you're not in like any like militias or, terrorist organizations or all kinds of other stuff. And basically after that, I gained that clearance and interned with the Secret Service for a few months on the counterfeit currency squad. a lot of people think that the Secret Service just does like protective duty, but they have a dual duty in terms of investigating currency crimes as well, counterfeit, different money laundering, stuff like that. So basically I was in charge, which is funny, as an intern, screening the mail every day for bombs and any other materials, like through like an X-ray machine. It's funny that they got the interns to do that, and then basically processing the counterfeit currency that came into that field office as well. And I got to do like fun things in my eyes. It was Bush's last year before Obama became president.
Mm-hmm.
So I went on like protective duties for Bush's daughters, and we went to the range. They took the interns to the range, so we got to shoot like 6 hours and MP5s, different other firearms that the Secret Service uses as well.
This sounds like a bit of a boy's dream.
Yeah, like your early 20s is pretty fun.
Yeah, yeah. Now, something I didn't really touch too much on was you've also got a podcast, the Digital Savage Experience podcast.
Yeah, I started that 5 years ago, and like I think everything in life that you start that's like positive, you kind of wish you started it sooner. So if I had the chance, I would have started it several years prior, but things like, the technology, the ins and outs kind of discouraged me up until then, and I just kind of jumped into it. So it started as a solo show. Now it's a interview-based format where I kind of like try to dissect what makes people tick, what made them who they are now, regardless of the good, the bad that they went through, both professionally and personally. And that's went on 5 years. I co-hosted another show, a year ago for like 15 episodes. So I've been in a podcast space for like 5 or 6 years at this point.
Awesome. And did you find, what kind of growth did you see come out of yourself? Like, how did you evolve as the show evolved?
Yeah, I think I would have stopped if it was a solo format, honestly, because there's only so many things you can talk about into a mic, I think, without having somebody talk back and it like, keeping your interest. So I think, I at least try to take like one thing out of every conversation and apply it, and kind of look at things from different perspectives. So really kind of networking, meeting new people, gaining new perspectives, finding people to collaborate with. So kind of opening my eyes to really people around the world, because a lot of the people, are from most continents that I've spoken to at this point, all over the world, and people that I normally wouldn't have had conversation with, I get to talk about and kind of pick their brain. I had someone that was one of the founding members of the Medellin drug cartel, and how they basically like found God and turned their life around and left that life. So I mean, in your everyday life, you don't necessarily will run into a person like that. Maybe you will, but just, meeting cool people and talking about their life experiences and what they learned from them.
Yeah, it's incredible. I think when you put yourself in those situations to meet people that you wouldn't ordinarily meet, some of the stories you hear are just absolutely wild.
Yeah, and I think everyone has a story. It's just a lot of people are afraid to share them. Some of the things like, talking about going through miscarriages. From the male perspective, I don't expect everybody to talk about that, but I saw there was a void. So like when I went through my first miscarriage, there was no resources and nobody talking about it in terms of kind of like, connecting and getting some kind of support. So I figured, why not start sharing, because I know other people are going through it. So I feel like, if you have something to share like that, and if you're comfortable to do so, you really should take the opportunity to do it.
I kind of slightly off topic, but related as well. I recently did a kind of a exercise where I asked people to say something positive about themselves. And, I was really struck by how difficult people find it to say something positive about themselves, especially in a public forum. I wonder how much of that is connected with, what you've just described, where people just kind of hold on to the stuff, keep it as close to their chest as they can, partly for fear of being judged for when they do come out and say something.
Yeah, probably. And I think it's just kind of also gaining a sense of self-awareness as you kind of mature and gain life experiences. I mean, if you ask me, I'm just like, I guess, hungry at all times. Behind closed doors, I try to recharge. Sometimes not as motivated as I want to be. Sometimes, sometimes somewhat emotional, like in my own space, based on like stuff I've experienced, deaths in the family. But it's like one of those things where you kind of have to brush that off and get up, and you have no other choice. You're still breathing, you can change your situation, and you have other people depending on you, so you have to be as, I guess, strong as possible.
Mm. And I think that that's strong as possible. Now, that's a great segue into a lot of the challenges that you've probably encountered as a foster parent. Do you want to share some of that? Why being a foster parent? Where did that come from? What was the catalyst for that?
Yeah, so like you mentioned, we went through the 6 miscarriages. We basically kind of started an infertility journey. So we had an egg retrieval, and then, each time also did embryo transfers basically, and those didn't make it out of the first trimester, and my wife ended up miscarrying. But we saw that us being foster parents would possibly be a way to potentially start a family, but even if not that, create a safe space and safe home for people for kids to be in our home while they transition from the situations that they've experienced, either saw or been through, and depending in if it's short term or long term, just like a place where they can basically heal. And kind of we took the first step of going to an orientation. Then we thought, let's do it. And it consists of like class time where you formally kind of, there's a book, like training, like going through scenarios and kind of legality, what are your rights in the state of New Jersey where I am as a foster parent, which aren't much, honestly. uh but yeah, it took like 10 months. You have to get licensed, your home has to get licensed. They do a home study, basically figuring out, why are you doing this? What are your motives? What do you hope to gain out of it? Looking at your finances, previous criminal record, if one exists, things of that nature. And, May 31st of 2018, we were licensed. And then the next day we had 2 boys dropped off at our doorstep, and basically like figure it out. And I think in the class period, like a lot of things, it's all like sunshine and unicorns, we're all there for you. And then, when they drop the kids off, nobody's picking up the phone, and basically are like, it's on you, you figure it out. And, we figured it out. Each case is different. Each child's needs are different. You basically, obviously, I haven't had biological kids, but it's getting a child that's several years raised by somebody else.
Mm.
They've seen something or they've been through something traumatic, and you have to learn, because a lot of times you don't get a lot of facts. It's very vague. They don't sometimes even mention what the kids came from, so things may trigger them, like something simple. A lot of the stuff, like they're neglected and malnourished, so like there's like food hoarding issues, so they just like cram large amounts of food, and sometimes even like throw up because they don't know, like based on their situation, when their next meal would be. So kind of reassuring them in that sense. Whatever type of abuse they've experienced, like they can react differently to things. So it's really like dissecting as fast as possible and figuring out what could possibly trigger them and be detrimental to them, kind of their healing process, and really just being there and being a safe place for them, for however long they are in your home.
Mm. Have you ever had experiences where you've just thought, actually, this is beyond our capability? Like this challenge that we're being presented with is just maybe a bit too far for what we're able to support?
Uh, I don't think so, because I think humans only reach a limited amount of their capability with whatever they do. I know, like, if it's something physical, like at 60 or 70%, your body's like, why don't you like calm down? You know what I mean? But like pushing through that threshold. And it was one of those things where we had no other, choices at that point. And, I think anything in life, I try to kind of stick with it and figure it out and do it to my best abilities. And, it's great where you have a spouse or partner with that, with you doing that, because a lot of the stuff, outside people don't necessarily understand. So, people may say like, what you're doing is admirable or great, but they don't understand like that we're dealing with all this, crap with like a broken system, caseworkers that only see the kids, a lot of them as numbers, being told, doesn't matter what you say about me, you're never going to get me fired, stuff like that, advocating for different therapy services and not getting them for the kids, and just a whole list of other stuff. So I think it's important, like we found like groups of foster parents that met periodically, every month, every other month, and really kind of like you have a place to vent, and then the other person really understands because they're going through exactly the same thing. So not like being a foster parent, if you've experienced something and you find somebody that experienced the same thing, there's like that kind of like I guess connection and understanding, like a level of connection and understanding. So we found a group of people to lean on and support system, and our family and friends have been really positive in terms of being there for the kids and being warm and welcoming. So and at the end of the day, like I guess taking a step back and understanding like these kids are dealing with a lot of issues that most adults won't deal with or see in their lives, and they're handling it usually relatively in a good manner. So what you can do, you can kind of, I guess, I don't know if the right word is suck it up and kind of like persevere through it, but with 29 kids, we've had 5 kids under the age of 4, and we managed to do it. And I think it's like before, like 5 years before I started being a foster parent, if you asked me, do you ever think you'll foster children, I'd probably say no. And then when we had our first placement, if you asked that, in 4 years, would you have fostered 29 kids? No. So it's like, you don't know what you're capable of in that, moment. And do you think you can have 5 kids under the age of 4? No. And somehow you just keep making it work. And it's like that, there's no other option.
Mm. Yeah, nice. It sounds like you've got a really strong partnership with your wife through all of this as well.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be able to do it on my own. It requires a lot of a lot of time because there's a lot of visits to facilitate, places to take the kids. There's people that stop by on a monthly basis for checks, like they state assigned nurses, caseworkers, resource workers, law guardians, and kind of like everyone in between. Especially during COVID, we had 4 kids. So each of those kids, everything moved to Zoom, all the calls, everything. And the caseworkers didn't facilitate it and basically mandated that the foster parents do that. So my wife had to facilitate between like, I would say 12 to 20 hours a week of Zoom calls, and facilitate all these calls with the biological parents and guardians. And oftentimes when parents have mental illness or they're just like belligerent or not in a good place, the caseworkers shield us from that. So we're not exposed and don't necessarily meet them if, they're going to be violent or combative or stuff like that. But, we were kind of thrown into it, and a lot of the parents had mental illness. So like the conversations weren't very productive, and, my wife had to facilitate it. And, if somebody got belligerent or just went off, she would try to, diffuse the situation. And if it wasn't diffused, she would just have to hang up. And, if the caseworker asked, what happened, like, what do you mean what happened? It wasn't a productive call, and I'm not going to expose the child to that. And yeah, so if I didn't have somebody with me doing this, I would not have, the time or anything to do it, especially with working, podcasting, having family with health issues, people passing, and everything in between, like life throws at you.
Mm. I think any parent with multiple kids at some stage, they're going to think, man, if I could just sort this one kid out, the rest of the boat will go smoothly, right? What are some things that you find, like when you've got a settled household and then you've got an incoming child that is just, it kind of throws everything out of sync? Like, how do you manage that?
Usually it's fairly like streamlined, honestly. Thank God. But sometimes, because we basically say, because we have kids usually from age 2 to 4. So we say, are they fine with younger kids? And if there's no history of like abuse, that child has, hit another child or did something to another child, because we won't expose the children in our home with somebody else like that. But sometimes, only one time we had to move a child, but he basically, the caseworker didn't disclose like any pre-existing conditions or anything like that. So there's something like called oppositional defiance disorder, that he has a hard time with authority, and he's like very violent to like his peers. So he basically was placed with us with his brother during COVID with two other children, one of which had special needs. And he would bully the special needs kid. He would tell him to say like inappropriate stuff. He would punch him when nobody was looking. And, unfortunately, like we can't have a situation like that in the home. So he was moved to a place where like he had one-on-one attention. And I think his thing is he needed one-on-one attention, and not, three other kids in the home. So, he wasn't a bad kid per se, but he just needed a different situation for him to thrive and for him to, kind of, I guess, get grounded. So there's situations like that where, a child is placed in a home with, let's say, multiple kids, but based on what they've experienced, they really need one-on-one attention and they have to be moved. But it all depends on the child. But that's the only time we've had someone that had I guess problems with the other kids in our home, and we didn't want to move him. We kind of didn't want to give up on him, but we gave it several months, and when his behavior wasn't changing and it was kind of endangering the rest of the kids in the home, we made the choice to move him to another foster home.
And I imagine that must be quite have another layer of difficulty, given you mentioned he had a sibling that was with you at the time.
Yeah, he had a sibling. Sibling took it well. We had another child from a different family that was exact age of that younger sibling of the child that had to get moved.
Mm-hmm.
So he kind of connected more with the other child, like similar age. So it wasn't really, at least that I didn't see. Maybe he didn't express it as much, but he seemed somewhat okay with what happened, and we explained to him what happened, and he got placed in a good situation. And the other foster parents came over with the older child for the younger child's birthday. We had like a pool party. We went over there several times, so he had communication, and he had visits with his mom, where both of them would come and see each other as well.
Recently in New Zealand, there was quite a lot of spotlight put on to Oranga Tamariki, which is essentially the government department that's tasked with child, youth and welfare, I think it's called. I can't remember what the full title was, but essentially they were removing children from homes. And it's obviously in a very, very emotive subject. There's, a whole lot of tension. There's a lot of, I guess, dynamics that people aren't familiar with. But I think what was potentially coming out was just that kind of 2% of the story of child is taken away from mother, and then a lot of the, like I said, the emotions that kind of get caught up in that. When you see that happening, how far down the road does that have to happen before a child is actually picked up and then placed on in with you guys?
Like a few hours later, kids show up with like a trash bag of clothes and stuff. Unfortunately, some kids show up with black and blue eyes and bloody noses and things. They actually, like, the formal thing, it depends. If it's either like somebody reported something and the child wasn't taken, and there's a caseworker that monitors the situation and goes and kind of checks up on them, and if things aren't improving or they see something that's concerning, they'll get a judge's order and then come with like a police officer and remove the child. Or sometimes there's like an abuse hotline here you can call, and they do like a random visit and they check, and if like what they say, what was the anonymous complaint, aligns, they'll take the child right there. And then usually, depending what day, time of hour, they need to do a physical just to check like whatever happened to them, if anything happened to them, like to make sure they're okay. And then as they know that they're removing them, there's a list of foster homes and like their occupancy or how many kids they can have, or some people just want younger kids, some people want older kids, some people have specific specifications that they're willing to take. So we have 2 children currently, but our house is licensed. Well, we sold our home, so we're in a rental now, but it's still technically can be licensed for about like 4 or 5 kids. So there's some situations where they'll call, or even we get something that's called like respite calls. Basically, other foster parents, if they have a medical emergency or they have to go out of state or somewhere on vacation, but they can't bring the child because their biological parents won't allow it, and a judge may not grant an order to do so, or something otherwise, where they basically, in that situation, they'll place the child with another foster family. So it's temporary. So, that can be a day, a week, 2 weeks. So we've had a few placements like that. So that's kind of like, I guess, the 3 scenarios that we've dealt with.
Mm. And before anybody gets any ideas about, being a foster parent just comes with oodles of money and become a millionaire off it, you actually have to pay quite a lot out of pocket, don't you? Like this is actually there's a significant cost there.
Yeah, I mean, in New Jersey, in the U.S., I mean, state to state is different, but you get a stipend for food, clothes, and really activities. But I mean, with the state of cost globally of things, and if you really want to provide I guess, a rich experience for the child, then you're paying out of pocket. So like US, I mean, it's anywhere from, I would say, like 750 to maybe $850 a month a child, depending if the child is older, if there's special needs, if they, require special care. It can be more. So it's one of those things where some people abuse it. There's situations where people get like 7 or 8 kids and take all those funds and, don't buy anything for the children and kind of pocket the money, but it's just like, it's not a significant amount of money or even like the direction my mind would think to do so. So like if you take the children like we have to Disney World, like Disney World, it's crazy as anything. It's like per person per day, it's like $100. You take four people for 3 days, it's like $1,200 just for the tickets, and then the lodging and the airfare. So like that one trip is like $3,000-4,000, which we've taken multiple kids to Disney World. We have a Six Flags, which is like an amusement park similar that is like 45 minutes away from us. So we've done that for season passes. We have season passes to aquariums. We have season passes to kids museums. So like when you add up all these activities and different sports and things like that, it's you're not profiting off of it, and that's what it shouldn't even be used for. It should be used for the needs of the child.
Mm. Mm. Do you find that, or is there a sense of, because a child might have come from quite a deprived background or a troubled background, when you take on the child, is there a sense of kind of wanting to correct some of that? Like, you talked about these experiences, these enriching experiences that children can go through. I mean, you could quite conceivably just kind of give them a house and food and just have like a non-violent household, right? Is there a sense of actually, given where they've come from, we want to kind of show them that there's more to the world than the experiences that they've had?
Yeah, I mean, we do that. I mean, a lot of them just require also a schedule, because they don't know the next time they'll eat. They don't know, like usually sometimes they don't even have a bed to sleep in. So having their own space, having a schedule, really being on the schedule, knowing, hey, you're eating breakfast at, I don't know, 8 in the morning, lunch at 2, and then dinner at 6 or 7. And if they align to that, a lot of just like simple things are corrected. I mean, they know that there's consequences to things. We have stuff like, because they're young, like timeout actually works, relevant to time proportion to actually like what they did.
Mm-hmm.
It's not like keeping the kids in timeout for half of the day, but stuff like that. So I mean, it's like what the children need. If they need like extra help or extra, we try to spend one-on-one time also. A lot of kids are coming from like multiple child homes. We had a placement where like 7 kids were removed. We didn't get all of the 7 because they went in different places. We had 2 of the younger kids. So making sure each child has kind of like one-on-one time, like group time, with like we do activities as a family, and then maybe I'll take one of the kids and go see a movie, just me and him or me and her, or go to like a kids museum for a few hours, stuff like that. So they get individual time, and then they get group time with us, and then obviously time as a family, whatever we're doing. A lot of children are coming from single parent homes, majority of which don't have fathers in their life. So me just being around is comforting and kind of helps them as well. Especially, well, I mean, growing up, my father was there but not there. So my father was abusive, so he hit my mom and stuff like that. I remember that as a child. And he threw my mom down the stairs when she was pregnant with my brother, and my brother was supposed to be stillborn, but thank God that didn't happen. He ended up actually graduating from Columbia University with a master's degree. So,
Nice.
he ended up being smart, or maybe he just thinks he's smart. But yeah, it was one of those things where I told myself, like growing up, also like related to this, that I would be kind of different. I don't know, maybe in my teens, like I would just be there, because half of the battle is actually being present, I think, in my opinion, and showing up to things. Because I mean, from 29 kids, it's a good sample size in a short amount of time to figure out what makes kids tick and what really impacts them, and what things they really need to thrive and grow.
Nice, man. That is a wealth of experience that you would have been able to collate. Do you ever lose your shit?
Yeah, I mean, behind closed doors, nobody's around.
Mm.
Because sometimes things are super frustrating, and it's not frustration with the kids or anybody else. It's just uh getting upset with the system. So like the system is broken. Like I always try to advocate for like foster care reform. The system in New Jersey was under federal overwatch for like 10 years because there was gross mismanagement and things slipping through the cracks, kids being put in situations that they shouldn't have been put in. So it's mainly like me advocating for the child. The child needs like therapeutic services, and somebody just brushes me off, so I get pissed with that situation. Or somebody like indirectly or directly, like whatever their actions are bringing harm to a child in my home, so yes, I'm going to protect them. So there's situations where, like, why are you talking in that tone to us? Because I mean, I don't really care about the tone I'm talking to you. I care about the kid in my home. So because you're
Mm.
being negligent and you're not doing what you're supposed to, I'm not gonna like put a smile on my face and be fake. Like, this is a situation. Like, you either remedy it, or I'm gonna have to escalate it. And one thing I learned is have everything in writing, because oftentimes people throw you under the bus when they don't do what they're supposed to. So there were situations, like a situation where I said that one child ended up being moved from our home, and there was a big call about it, like a Zoom call, and my wife actually documented every text message, every email with the caseworker, told the caseworker this, the caseworker wasn't truthful about him having this condition and stuff like that. And then basically the caseworker supervisor on the call like threw my wife under the bus, like, maybe you can't handle this amount of children, or like maybe you can't parent or something like that, she said. So then my wife wrote an email, and then she had every single thing documented. So she like referenced and screenshotted every email, every text message, and wrote out like a thesis paper, basically like 4 pages, and copied like 12 people. And then those 12 people, so at the day she sent that email, I think like 80 people in various departments in the state saw it, and then just things started happening. And,
Mm.
people were just quiet and actually like doing things. So like one of the biggest things from like a process standpoint is like always document, like never just like talk something on the phone, because you can be told something and then that could be like misconstrued, or something different comes out of it. So whenever there's communication, like a major communication, my wife will write an email, even if the caseworker says, let's jump on a call. It's like, no, like, I need to, write this via email, or, you can write this out in a text message where I can actually save and archive it.
Nice. Nice. It's a shame that that's a step that you've got to do, but there's a lot of, like you say, people can often misconstrue something, and something said with good intent might be inaccurate, or the way that person said it wasn't really meant to be the way that they said it, or there's a whole lot of grey in there. What are some ways that you and your wife kind of manage stress?
It's a good question. I think sometimes there's not enough time to be stressed out. When you get to the end of the day, there's only so many hours left that it's just like, all right, just like hang out, sit for a few hours, like talk, like watch a show or something, and then go to sleep. We we try to do like a date night or like a day once a month or something just to ourselves if we can get my mother-in-law or somebody else to babysit. So like having like alone time or like kid-free time, um just kind of like regrouping at times, because
Mm.
sometimes we're both stressed out at the same thing, but then it just like it gets to you. So sometimes you can take it out on your spouse, and then that adds an extra layer from you to kind of have to dig out of, and just like completely, shoots the whole day. And it's not a good thing. So kind of figuring out like what each person is dealing with, and
Mm.
like if I can help with anything, if she can help me. um she handles a lot in terms of kind of like getting the kids from point A to point B, and things of that nature. So I think it's just like spending one-on-one time together. When we could, we would travel. Now we can't travel as long, but before kids, we'd go to like Iceland or like fly to Paris or places like that, just to kind of like you enjoy each other's company. Now it's limited, but things are kind of obviously globally are getting back to normal. So an ability to do that. We have a RV. We haven't used it yet, so at some point maybe take it out a bit, but really kind of taking the time to just spend time with each other. And the benefit of having kids, usually between 2 to 4 years old, they go to bed early. So usually bedtime's at like 7:30, 7:30 p.m. So we have at least, a few hours, to ourselves, just to kind of, I guess, unwind.
Yeah, because that's super important, right? That period where you can just kind of regather, ground yourselves, like have that connection. I would imagine. I mean, we've only got 4 kids, and I know that there's definitely times where you just are so busy and you feel so stretched and pulled from pillar to post that small period of time where you can just even just be sitting by your partner and you just just to go through that phase together, that process together of kind of decompressing, it's incredibly powerful. And sometimes I think it just gets overlooked, and then you roll on to the next day, and then the next day, and the next day, and before you know it, you've kind of things are starting to escalate. Mm.
Yeah, I mean, in the morning I try to take time to myself. So like go for a walk for like 15, 20 minutes. I have one street down. I live between the border of New Jersey and Pennsylvania. They're two states, and basically the Delaware River separates it. So I have a river. Basically, I look out the window, so I walk, like sometimes take walks by it. Now it's been super cold here. So sometimes where it's like below freezing, I'll walk just shorts and t-shirt. And I think it has like, I mean, I'm not recommending it for somebody, but a lot of the stuff, now for, health and like just clarity is like cold and heat. So like sauna and like, ice baths, ice, whatever. So or like cryotherapy. So I feel like I'm getting that naturally. So if it's like super freezing below zero, I'll just walk with shorts, t-shirt, a winter hat, and like gloves for maybe I would say like 15, 20 minutes. And it just like puts me, I guess, in focus. So I guess I do that, but like a good morning routine, I think definitely helps as well.
Absolutely. My wife and I, we're getting into the cold water immersion therapy, which is just a fancy name for ice baths, right? So we're really getting into those and just finding the benefits. Even just the fact that we're doing this thing together has been really helpful. Slightly change. You mentioned something, and I forgot to ask earlier. Is you were actually in a foster to adopt program or whatever that terminology is. What is that? What does that actually look like?
Yeah, so it's like license, like you figure out what your classification, like what do you want to do with it. So like if you're just a straight foster parent, um, you have children and you may not, or you may not be looking to adopt. Like our kind of classification is foster to adopt. So basically, like it's not flagged, it's like written on our file or our license. So basically, if parental rights are terminated of a child that's in your home, and they become the ward of the state, and everything uh works out in terms of like it being a good fit, you would be the first people that the state, in my situation, the state of New Jersey, would come to and see, is this a good fit, and are you willing to adopt a child? So we're in a process. Hopefully in 2 months we move through the whole kind of adoption journey for a child we had for now 2.5 years, really straight from the hospital. His
Whoa.
mother basically was, on drugs. She walked into the hospital. She thought she had a stomach ache, and he was like basically hanging out of her. He was born at 4 pounds. He was in the NICU for a week, like on a breathing apparatus, and they had to flush the drugs out of his system, and they didn't think he would make it past that week. And then week 2, he was there, and luckily discharged. He was born at 4 pounds, and basically the mom's rights were terminated a few months ago, and he moved into the adoption unit. Also, he has 5 other siblings that have all been, the parental rights have been terminated, and mom's only 28 years old. So it's an unfortunate situation. She's been like a lifelong drug user, and the environment really defines where you end up too. So when she was young, and I've encountered this several times, like it's this kind of vicious cycle. When she was a child, she was in foster care as well, and her parents also were in foster care. So like the cycle of like abuse, neglect, drug abuse, alcoholism kind of carried over in this whole vicious kind of generational circle. Her dad is one of like founding members of like a notorious gang in the state. Her brother's on trial for murder in another state. So it's just like a lot of situations like that. Like it's hard to find a family member that is willing to take the child or children. In my state, everything's really political, honestly. So when they had a new governor, he elected a new like head of the child welfare or child protective services department, and she moved to a strategy of guardianship, so pushing foster kids more so, and finding at any cost a family member or relative willing to take them over putting them into a foster home. I don't know how I necessarily agree with that strategy. Yeah, but it kind of naturally happens also because while the children are in your home, they're doing investigative kind of things to find family members both in state and out of state that would qualify for you to for them to take them. I mean, oftentimes it's sad that the family members just want them for that, 800-900 bucks. They don't necessarily want them because they're related, situations like that. So yeah, a lot of them are being pushed to guardianship, even though that guardianship environment that they're being pushed to isn't the best versus what they would probably have in, I guess, a good foster home.
Mm, mm. How do you manage when you build a strong emotional bond with a child and then they have to be, I guess, for want of a better phrase, moved on into the next phase of their life?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm numb from at this point, and I feel like you have to be some kind of like emotional masochist to be a foster parent because you know what's coming. Like you develop a attachment, an emotional connection, you care for the child, and then the child may, get reunified, they may leave, and a whole lot of things can happen, especially in the foster care system where a case can change overnight. I mean, there was one of the cases we had a child that was nonverbal. He was already like 2.5, 3. When he was like 2, he ended up going into a hospital. He had a fractured skull and all these other crazy injuries. And he was nonverbal because like his mom was prostituting, and like she would beat him, and he would just like she would put him in a closet. He'd basically sit there quietly in the closet the whole time. So basically, he found a family member to take him, but he was with us for like a month and a half. But they gave us a half-hour notice. So my wife was at work. We couldn't like do anything. Nobody that he met from our family or friends could say bye. And it was just basically she had to rush home, pack all of her stuff up, and somebody showed up in like 10 minutes, took him, and that was that. And really, it's dependent on if a child is reunified or they're moved into another home or go to another relative. It's up to that person that now has him to have any communication with the foster, parents that he was with. We try to be a resource after the fact, anything that somebody needs. My wife actually, for our first placement, a foster mom basically got up and left to Chicago. That's, I mean, in the middle of the country, not told anybody months ago. She ended up in a bad situation, um, ended up in a shelter before my wife basically, we spent all this money. She flew out there because somebody drove out with her to begin with. My wife flew out there like 2 weeks ago, basically landed 7 a.m. She picked her up and then drove cross country and brought her back here. So there's situations like that. She didn't have any food. The kids were hungry. So we went to the store, bought them like, $200 worth of groceries for the month before like any kind of assistance kick in. So, we're always there. And I think it's one of those things where you have 29 kids, you always worry about them, make sure, they're getting the best or they're not in any kind of like dangerous situations. But if something arises and they need help, we're always there to kind of just like, regardless of what it is, regardless if we can provide it, because we didn't necessarily have the money to just pay a last minute ticket and then drive cross country for her to do that and pay for hotel rooms and stuff. But, since we care about the kids and don't want to see anything happen to them, we just do that out of, the love that we have for them.
Mm. So you did say so. Your journey as a foster parent started in 2018. Is that right?
Yep, May 31st, we were registered or licensed. The next day, June 1st, we had our first placement of 2 boys.
Jeepers creepers. So that to me seems like a large number of kids in a quite a short period of time. I mean, that's like we're talking about maybe 4.5 years, right?
Yeah, and it would actually be more honestly based on, but we've had kids that have returned, certain kids that have come back for what's, respite care. We have, 2 boys that are with their grandparents, but when the grandparents need a break or whatever, so we stopped like they stopped going through the Division of Child Services, so they just call us directly. So at this point in the last like 3 years, we've spent like maybe 15 or 20 weekends with them. So there's situations like that, but it is a lot. But some kids are with us for a few days, and some kids are with us for a year and a half, 2 years. A lot of the time coming into it, we know that it's going to be a short-term placement. Sometimes we had, unfortunately, a situation, during COVID, one of the 4 kids we had with us, like I mentioned, with special needs. So basically the foster parent that he was with basically said, I'm going to I'm having some kind of medical procedure or something like that. And he has to, can't be in the home. So for 10 days, but the reason that they wanted him to really go to respite is because they didn't want to feel guilty to get rid of him, but they did want him out of the home. So basically after those 10 days, they basically said, oh, it seems like a good fit at your home. I think you should stay there. And then it was on us. We're like, do we ship this child to another home or we stay with, he stays with us. So it was really the first child we had that had special needs. I mean, he was a great kid. He ended up going back home, and we still kind of keep in contact with him. But for, somebody that had his conditions, he was, fairly intuitive and smart and funny. So But it was one of those things like, okay, he has special needs. Now, what do we do? And it sucked
Mm.
that we were put in that kind of situation, but we kind of ran with it, and it turned out for the better.
Nice. I'm glad that it did. I'm glad that it did. What kind of advice would you give to somebody who wanted to add value in some way? Maybe they don't want to go the whole hog and be a foster parent, but they want to just like they can see themselves contributing. They want to contribute something positive to the experience of a child that's going through foster care or foster parents. What's something that practical that somebody can do?
One, kind of figure out like who's a foster parent or a foster home in your community or the area you live in, and
Mm.
see if you can be a resource. Come over, shoot hoops, kick a ball around with the kid, or I always say like a formal mentorship. So like here they have like big brothers, big sisters programs. We had a child with us a few weeks. He was 14. It's sad that basically had a bunch of other siblings. His family adopted those siblings, but they didn't want him, which probably feels like crap for a kid. That all your
Man.
brothers and sisters were taken by aunts, uncles, and so on and so forth, and he was supposed to go with his dad, and a week before he was supposed to get permanently reunified with him, the dad basically said, I don't want him. So now he's it's a crappy situation. But while he was with us for 2 weeks, one time for 2 weeks, and then we figured out that he basically, there's another thing, we weren't expecting to take a teenager, but we figured out right before Christmas, the people he was with had to go away, so they couldn't find anything for him. He got put in a group home, like a group kid home, and it's usually like bad kids get put in there, you know what I mean? He was not like a criminal, he was not anything. And we found out from the caseworker or the adoption worker, like he's like not sleeping at night because he's like guarding his stuff, like he's getting beat up at night by the other kids and
Oh,
stuff. And he had like a learning delay as well, so they were making fun of him and bullying him for that. So I mean, there's situations like that as well. I mean, if I had 10 hours, I can go through every child and what they really came from. But he had a mentor, so like a big brother, big sister, or whatever the organization nonprofit was from. So that person picked him up one night for like 2 3 hours. They went bowling. He kind of helped him with his homework. He brought some like stuff to work on, and they kind of just talk. So if you have like a few spare hours a week, you can really like provide mentorship, especially when a lot of foster children are coming from situations where I mean, I'm speaking right now to the male perspective. I mean, women can as well, because I mean, it's beneficial, but a lot of them do not have fathers or never knew, who their father was. So I
mm.
feel like it's that much more impactful to be a male role model in that situation, and could be kind of the turning point in their lives, because oftentimes a lot of people like that I've interviewed or I've heard speak, that thing that kept them going in the right direction was, it didn't even have to be a mentor. It was a teacher or a coach, or somebody that was in their life briefly that showed, compassion to them and showed them, what it was to, to be a man if they didn't really have an example to follow prior.
Yeah, it feels like it's such a small contribution in the scheme of things that could have such a deep, long-lasting impact on a child.
Yeah, I mean, little things really uh, help. I mean, people overlook that or feel like they have to drop tens of thousands of dollars to have their kids like all the best things. But I mean, if you do that and you're not never around, it's still detrimental. Like, I had a home, I had all kinds of stuff when I was growing up, but my dad was never around. So I don't remember having like the newest game system. I remember of him not being there. You know what I mean? So
Mm.
it's that much more impactful.
Yeah, for sure. Now, kind of interwoven with your foster parent journey has been the number of miscarriages that you and your wife have gone through. And I don't know the odds of this, but two of them happening on Christmas Day. How is that? How has that shaped your thinking, and how has that influenced you?
Yeah, so I mean that's one reason we kind of explored being foster parents, because at that point we already spent like 100,000 US dollars out of pocket on all the infertility treatments and stuff like that, because a lot of the stuff insurance doesn't cover. So we looked into like straight adoption, but oftentimes that's like 40, $50,000 out of pocket, which we didn't have liquid funds after, giving all this money to the process. So like, we started exploring, you know, being foster parents. And we've already, like, when we started the infertility journey, we've, experienced a few miscarriages, and a few of them were like coincided, or the timeline overlapped of us already being foster parents and still obviously naturally trying and doing embryo transfers and infertility treatments as well. And then, like you mentioned, two of them happened on Christmas days. People were over our house, so it was like, at this point, like every Christmas, yeah, it's a joyous thing, but at the end of the day, it's tied to a traumatic event, which stays in the back of your mind. But the last miscarriage was kind of like during COVID, which sucked from the perspective, like, I mean, they all suck, but basically I had to go with my wife to like the infertility place, clinic, hospital, whatever you want to call it, and she had to go in herself and get like the embryo or the fetus removed out of her, and I couldn't even be there because of COVID, so I had to sit in my car outside in the parking lot. And for most of the process, like, for me personally, like from the male perspective, you feel somewhat helpless. So like you're grieving in your own way, but like, your wife partner is dealing with it twofold, with like different hormonal changes to her body and just her body going through that process as well. So that last one was like extra tough from that perspective, but it was also um more comforting as well, because we had the baby that we're hoping to adopt now. So it was like, it hurt, but we had kids in our home. So it was like, we kind of gotta, mourn and grieve in our own way, but like we couldn't just like stop life. Um, when my grandfather passed away 3 years ago, he was kind of my main male role model. Like the grieving process was different. Like I took it hard because it was the first person I lost close to me. And basically, like after a few weeks, and I saw like it wouldn't be fair to him for me to give up and just stop everything in order to to do whatever. It would make sense for me to do my best and kind of take care of the kids and do everything else, follow my goals and dreams in order to honor his memory. So it's one of those things where like you remember it, and each one hurts just as much as the other one, to the point where you kind of, in a way, for me, just become numb and start asking questions like, why would God, grant this to people that actually want to start a family, want to have kids, are loving, provide for them, things like that, and they just keep happening. And I mean, also they're there. So eventually it's like with everything in life, I guess, like that initial event is like a wound, and then that grieving process, it's like you heal it, but that scar is still there. So like technically you have from that life experience 6 scars that will always be there. And like I'll always think back about it, but you just like, you learn to live with it, I guess.
Have you reached the stage where you said actually that's probably not going to be where where a child comes from? Have you kind of had some closure on that, or is there where are you
I
at
mean,
the
we're
moment?
still naturally trying and stuff like that, and we may do another cycle. We don't know. But I mean, the likelihood of us adopting before that happens is, you know, a lot greater.
Mm.
Because I mean, the adoption is moving into kind of like the later steps, and hopefully by March, this March 2023, we get to adopt our son. So
Wow, so it's that close. So you've gone through pretty much, by the time you get to that stage through the process, it sounds like you've well and truly broken the back of it.
but yeah, I mean, we've had, like I said, we've had him for 2.5 years, right? Like straight from when he was 2 weeks old, and it was just a process where it was dragged out. Like the facts are like a little different. So last time anybody saw him was like, he was born the day after me, which is funny. I was born August 18th. He was born August 19th. And then in October, end of October, was the last time anyone saw him on a visit. And then from that point, he's had no visits. His mom just disappeared. And there was a potential father that, they petitioned him to do like 10 paternity tests. He wouldn't do it. So they got a sample. Apparently, which is interesting, you can get it for like if you denied a paternity test, you got someone pregnant and you refused it and they can't like get a hold of you. If your mom is alive and whatever, because of that genetic tie, they can get a sample from your mom and it's almost as accurate as getting it from you. So they got it from that person's mom. She actually went to visit thinking she was a grandma. And they found out that basically eliminated them, like he wasn't the father. And
Oh
then after
man.
that, the mom wasn't around. So there was nobody visiting. And then a few times people came out of the woodwork, like his grandfather wanted him, but his grandfather just got out of prison. His grandfather, like I said, was a founding member of a gang. He shot somebody in the face before. He's, gotten arrested with drugs and guns and all kinds of other, crimes. So that wasn't going to be the case either.
Mm. Is there a point where can the process be? I'm assuming the process could still be derailed. Bless you. I'm assuming there's always an
Sorry.
opportunity. No, no stress. For the process to be derailed. Once the child is formally, I guess, legally within, you legally adopt the child, and it's kind of the final full stop is put on that. Is there any recourse for somebody to come out of the woodwork and say, well, actually, I am the father, and then kind of that gets relitigated, or what happens there?
The father, I mean, she wouldn't even know who the father is. Like all the other, because there's so many mitigating variables that it's not like one of those things where like there was like 5 family members and they're great and they ended up not taking him. It's like all these mitigating factors. So like all his siblings were all the parental rights were terminated for every child. They were all adopted out. She hasn't done anything in 2.5 years. She
Mm,
hasn't shown up. She didn't even like she was so like sad. She was so under the influence where like the adoption worker came to her with a picture of him and she just like blankly stared at it. She didn't even recognize like who it was or like the fact that like she had that child out there.
man.
She never went to court. So, like I said, parental rights were terminated a few months ago. Yes, there's things that can happen in the 11th hour. Like there's been adoption side railed where they're about to get adopted and somebody from like a different state comes forward or somebody else and says, no, I don't want this, I'll take them. And they basically push priority. Like if you're a blood relative, like they supersede a foster parent. So in the 11th hour that could happen. We've been praying about it, obviously, that nobody's come out of the woodwork or anything like that. But
Mm,
once he's adopted, pretty it's pretty strong that nobody can reverse that because there's so many negative like mitigating factors within that family that it wouldn't even make any sense.
mm,
And I mean, at that point, you can legally fight it because there's like you can prove that they're not necessarily fit to take him.
mm. So,
But yeah, I've heard of people last minute because nothing's guaranteed. Like when a child's in your home, when you think something is moving uh to adoption, like that's actually what happened with her first placement. So a lot of the time, the Division of Child Services will say stuff just to get a child placed because oftentimes there's not enough homes, there's not enough good homes. Like the system is obviously stressed with the volume of kids. I mean, there's 5 or 600,000 kids in the U.S. in the foster care system. So
that's
basically,
incredible.
they were, yeah, it's sad. And another interesting tidbit that there was a survey done of people incarcerated. I believe like 70 to 75% identified as being in a foster care system at one point or another when they were when they were growing up, which is like crazy and another crazy correlation. But basically we were told because they knew we were foster to adopt kind of on our heartstrings like yeah the mom's not getting them back. They're, moving to adoption, which wasn't the case, and they knew wasn't the case. And that's like they knew we would probably want to take them since we're brand new foster parents, and that's like our goal from us being foster parents. So, we ended up taking them. And, when you're a new foster parent and you start having kids in your home, and you start dealing with the state and different employees and stuff, like you start learning real quick kind of the ins and outs. I feel like it's like a scared straight approach. Here there's like a show Scared Straight, so they bring kids into prison and like have them experience it because they're moving down that path. But it's just like in the class format, we sat there and it's like, we're all there for you. Whenever you need something, you can call on us. And it's like two kids are dropped off the day after you're licensed, and we're like looking for people, and people are like, figure it out. And what do? You figure it out. So,
Yeah, that sounds like, unfortunately, quite a lot of dysfunction within the system, coupled with some of the other things you've talked about, like how disjointed it is and the lack of integration, and kind of during COVID here, you guys sorted out. I mean, that's a lot to put on people who are, trying to do the best, trying to help out as much as they can, and then you kind of given this unhelpful hot potato to just catch and sort out on your own.
yeah, there's a lot of situations like that. There's situations where we had caseworker. There's good caseworkers, bad caseworkers. We had caseworkers telling us, no matter what you say about us, you're never going to get us fired. So obviously, with that mindset, you're not really there to, benefit the kids. We've had situation where because we don't like discriminate who we take. So like based on the area we're in the state I'm in, and I'm in the state capital, more like in a city area, out of like the 29 kids, about 24 were black. So a lot of people don't like the fact that white parents are raising black kids, both the parents and guardians that they were taken from, and sometimes black caseworkers that kind of like give you a hard time about it, and like kind of a racism vibe. So there's like different things even dealt with that on top of the stuff where people are like, you just have like a white savior complex, and it's like, no, wouldn't it be worse if I said, hey, I don't want any black kids in my home? Like, you know what I mean? So it's like,
Man, it's incredible to think that in amongst all of that, all the things you have to deal with, and that's another thing you have to add on top as well, and kind of manage your way through that. It's incredible. There is almost a no-win situation there, like you say. It's like, well, what would you say if I said no black kids? Oh, wow, then they're not eligible for other kids either because they're clearly racist. I mean, it's a tough position to be in. Where do you see yourself from here? So the adoption goes through and that's successful. Do you think that's going to have an impact on your view as a foster parent at all, or what do you think will happen after that?
like we're still fostering, but oftentimes after a while, all the good homes, the people are just like fed up. Like, I don't need this. I don't need to like go through this. I don't need to be treated like this. And they close their homes, basically, basically are done fostering. Situations where like basically also if a child is with you and they are reunified and then they're taken again and put back in the system, you theoretically should be the first to be notified and asked if they can come back and stay with you. The other boy we have with us since at this point, 2 August, not this past August, the August before that, I vouched, basically, express my opinion, like you shouldn't be going home. Like his mom has mental illness that it's a major problem in the U.S. Mental illness as a whole not being addressed. So, there's a lot of homelessness and stuff with people with mental illness and everything in between, not diagnosed properly. So basically, I'm like, he's going to be back in the system in a few weeks. And then I had a combative caseworker. Like, I know better. I've been doing this for 20 years. I'm like, just because you've been doing something for 20 years doesn't mean you're good at it. You know what I mean?
Exactly
Out of
right.
any profession, it's just like, you're just skating like under the guise of whatever and not getting fired and just doing just enough to not be on the radar for anything. So just like I said, 6 weeks later, taken for the same thing, neglect. She like left him and his sister that's nonverbal autistic that eats out of a GI tube by themselves, and he was 5, and that's what happened to them when they was 2. So basically out of his whole life, 70% of his life he's been in a foster care system. He was with before he came to us the first time, he was with an aunt, but the aunt said, I can't deal with this, because the mom basically came over there and like beat her up, was irate, was like violent and threatening to her, and she's like, I can't do this. So, he ended up in our home. The first time he was with us for like a year, and like I said, I advocated for him, like, this isn't a good idea, but like I said, the voice of foster parents aren't weighed for anything. Like, if you go to court before a child's reunified and tell them, like, honestly, where it's not like emotional, because sometimes it's like you're being in a way selfish, like, they should be going home, but based on the bond you created, you don't want them to go. But in this situation, like, I knew, like, yeah, I loved him and we wanted him to stay with us, and if the chance arose to adopt him, but him going back is not the best thing for him. The same thing's gonna happen that happened. And unfortunately, like, I didn't want to be right, but I was right. So he's been with us ever since. So situations like that, our home is obviously still licensed and stuff like that. So we kind of worry about like the 29 kids. Well, 28 other kids. What if we closed our home and then the kids ended up back in the system? Like, we would obviously want them back with us. But situations like that, I don't know how long after, if we do get to adopt, how long we would, stay a licensed foster home and close the home, just based on everything we've dealt with with the foster care system and just stuff happening during. I mean, this past summer, my grandmother passed away, and then within the 6 weeks of that, my wife's grandfather passed away. So it's just like a lot of life has happened in like the 4.5 years since we've been foster parents. So realistically, if we adopt, have the other boy in our home, if he gets reunified, he gets reunified. State that if he needs to come back, he can come back, but potentially maybe take a break and kind of recharge and reevaluate, because you do get very drained, and oftentimes, because how you're treated as a foster parent, like, your voice isn't valued. Like, you're basically told, like, you work for, like, I've been told, you work for us. I'm like, I don't work for anybody. I don't get a paycheck. So, like, you need to step back a little bit. I don't work for anyone. Like, this is like, I've had so many people say, like, I'm combative, but I don't really care. Like, you know what I mean? Like, you need to have, like, if you're emotional about something, like, if you hear emotion in somebody's voice, somebody cares about something. I'm not saying like being belligerent and getting in somebody's face, getting violent, but like, if you're coming to my home and you're doing something or inadvertently not doing something that's causing harm to a child in my home, it's my duty to advocate for that child. So if I get like, I've had people basically tell people or caseworkers, like, there's situations where the children are allergic to something, and they go on a visit and their parents keep giving it to them. So at the point, like, where it's like they're getting rashes and stuff like that, I'm like, you're supervising the visit. What are you doing? And they're like, well, and then they come the next time, like, I'm going to hold you personally responsible. I'm not holding the division. I'm going to sue you personally for negligence. And then they get all like, flustered. And then they come because they're like, apparently so scary. They come with other people. I'm like, you're bringing other people. It's not your bodyguard. Like, you can bring 10 people. I'm still going to say the same thing. I don't really care. Like, you're being negligent. You're not doing what you're supposed to do. You expect me to talk to you super nice. Like, hello. Like, I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to be monotone because you don't listen. So maybe like we need to change the way we're doing something because this isn't working. So,
man, you sound like you're dealing with so there's the parenting aspect, right, where you just deal with all these things as a parent. You're dealing with, getting kids into a routine, getting them into bed, trying not to lose your shit if things, don't work out as well as what you'd hope. But then you've got all these other dynamics and all these other extra layers.
Yeah, that's less stressful. The parent part is the least stressful. The dealing with, like, I don't want to be mean and say brain dead people, but usually it's like dealing with zombies that have been so like deconditioned and so desensitized because they've been in their roles and saw this and maybe have a negative pessimistic view of like they can't change anything, that they don't do anything. So it's like I'm a person of action and I need to get things done. And if you're standing in my way, we're going to figure out how to solve this, or I'm going above you or going around you because you're not delivering what you need to deliver for these kids.
They stop being part of the solution, don't they?
Yeah, oftentimes, and I'm like I said, I don't want to be like one of those people where like every foster, a caseworker in a foster care system's bad. We had some really good ones, but unfortunately, we've had a few bad ones as well.
Mm. What's a bit of practical advice you'd give to a parent just on the parenting stuff? Because a large number of the people that tune into this show or that we have relationships with, it always comes down to the parenting. Once they can kind of get the kids into a good place, it helps them with their mental health. It helps them kind of live the life that they're hoping to lead as well. What's some practical parenting advice that you'd be happy to share?
I mean, like I mentioned before, just being present, um, having a routine, making I mean, in my situation, having one-on-one time, because oftentimes there is no time for any of that. So encouraging the kids to explore like activities or what they're interested in, and like don't force them to do something like that. You always wanted to play a sport, so like you're throwing them into sport and they don't want to do it. That's actually the worst thing you can actually do, because I remember, so we had this conversation with a musician and I had on my show. um he became a musician. I was like, I played violin, piano, and guitar when I was growing up, and I hated it because my mom made me do it. So like my mom, like, oh, like it would be awesome if you played, and it's like, okay, and kind of forced me into it. So don't force the kid into like activities or whatever. Like let them be kids. Like there's
Yeah.
time for that. If they want to do something, like, oh, I want to play basketball, football, soccer, whatever. I want to learn robotics or anything. Encourage that and facilitate that. Help them with it. Potentially do it as a hobby, but don't force them to do so in my situation, because they have enough to worry about in terms of kind of like what they've experienced and what they're experiencing. And oftentimes they're confused in my situation because they have visits with their biological parents and guardians when they're removed, if they reach a certain kind of threshold. So like, let's say, the parents were on drugs, like you need a clean drug test. So once that's achieved, you have in-office supervised visits, and there's like a pyramid of visits. So first, it's usually in-office supervised for like a handful of hours, 1-2 hours. Then you get a privilege of more hours. So in-office supervised with a longer period of time, that moves into in-office unsupervised, and then more time, and then at-home supervised, more time. At home unsupervised, and then weekend visits. When it moves to weekend visits, like from experience, I've learned usually within that time, the kids are getting reunified within like 6 to 8 weeks. Once it moves into weekend visits,
Hmm.
the kids are going to be going home if the plan stays on track and, the parents at that point need it. So like for me personally, it's just like, be there and identify things. I think wearing different hats as well. So like you're their guardian, you're their kind of confidant in their way, you're their therapist, psychologist, so on and so forth. You're their counselor, you're their caseworker, really. So wearing those multiple hats, and your kids the best as a parent, and look for different things maybe they're experiencing. If behavior changes, figure out maybe they need something or they're going through something. So I would say not forcing them or pressuring them into things that you may want to do or you may want to have done as a child, or comparing them. Worst thing is also comparison. I hate that also. Well, I hated it thinking back. So when my parents say, why aren't you like so and so's child? That is like the worst thing you can do.
Yeah.
So like, don't compare, let them be them. And I think the biggest thing is just being present.
Yeah, I love that, man. That is brilliant advice. I wish we had had this conversation about 3 or 4 years ago before I forced one of our kids into doing an activity, a sport that they just hated. But I really sucked the fun right out of it. So yes, absolutely, I couldn't agree with you more. And I love the being present part as well. It's just I think we have underestimated how important that is. And, in a day and age where it's all about possessions and followers and all the rest, actually just being there is just the bee's knees. It's a great place to start off. Before I hand back the mic, just for some final words on how people can reach, I've really enjoyed this conversation, bro. It has been thought-provoking, a wee bit saddening as well, if I'm honest, just to hear some of the system and where it's falling apart. But I also wanted to comment that I found it really uplifting hearing about your journey and the way that you and your wife have been able to navigate through a lot of the system's pitfalls to bring a kind of life that I would only imagine a lot of these kids would not have had the opportunity to be exposed to. So thank you so much for your candidness and the honesty, bro. I really appreciate that. I know it means a lot to me that, people can come on and share what's going on in their world and, from a very, very real perspective. So I do appreciate that, brother. In terms of how somebody could reach you or your podcast, where might they go?
Yeah, me, I mean, I'm on almost every social platform. So, Roman Prokopchuk, I'll show up. I mean, obviously the last name's a little hard, but if you kind of type something that sounds like it, you'll probably find me. The podcast website is digitalsavageexperience.com.
Awesome. And just to help along with that, I'll put that into the show notes as well. I'm looking forward to hearing your podcast, man. I haven't had a chance to dial into it, but I am looking forward to catching up and seeing what's going on there. Roman, thank you so much again, brother. I really appreciate your time, and I'm looking forward to catching up again.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Awesome. Cheers, bro.